Flora seemed like the decent sort when I met her. Her husband, my friend Abel, was head over heels. Abel was atypical in many ways. For a fellow who despises going to church, loves his food, and delights at the prospect of moving off into the mountains to be seen by few men ever again. One might imagine his euphoria at finding a woman who shared these peculiarities. She was heavy, but he didn't give a damn about that. No, sir. She was friendly, but evasive about where she came from. When asked, she'd say a glib thing like, "I'm a traveler," or "I took the ferry across the river." Whereas I have lived my life as a free man from Illinois. Abel hailed from Tennessee and was a slave in his boyhood. His former master, Albert Langley, didn't take kindly to his liberation, and after 10 years or so went by, he started following Abel and harassing him from town to town. Me and Abel would work what we could, herding cattle, shoveling manure, but sooner or later the old bastard would arrive. We met Flora in Mississippi, and it was Abel's infatuation with her, I'd surmise, that caused him to decide that he wasn't going to no other town. He looked at me one day as we was walking the thoroughfare and said, "Wallace, this ain't gonna end without me or him dying. You know it." And I knew it. Last time back, Langley got real violent. There were men who held him back, kept him from creating too much of a scene, but we still got kicked out of town. The new plan was for me to take Langley astray while Abel and his new bride departed for the woods. Abel donated the entirety of his remaining funds so we could use it for bribes, have people corroborate my directions to he and his wife's whereabouts. He said he would need it. He had me memorize directions to get to him so I could reach him if ever there was great urgency. I redirected Langley as best I could, sent him southward. I moved back to the same town where Abel and I met. A year after that, I got a letter from a friend of Abel's which said that his brother had died, murdered by Langley, who served trial but was not convicted. I then wished I had not agreed to Abel's plan. He was a good man, but where he was handy with a carpenter's hammer, he had no pistol arm. I'd seen him in tussles, and he was not often victorious. I set off to find him with two intentions: to deliver the letter that I had received, and to stay there to ensure his continued well-being. The directions that Abel gave me were verbose but exact. I had memorized them to the last word, knowing that there would not likely be a more important set of instructions needing memorization encountered in my life. His cabin was on one hill of many, amongst some trees of many, far from the camp we had met at a year ago. Having passed into the thickest part of the woods some hours past, I saw something standing on its hind legs out the corner of my eyes, which retreated beyond view and into the bush when I turned to look at it. It would have been the right size for a bear. Otherwise, the critters of the forest seemed to take no interest in me. By the middle of the following day, and after a disconcerting misstep which convinced me that I'd forgotten my way after all, I rode into a clearing just open enough for a one-room pine log cabin. As I approached, it was apparent that something was amiss. The door to the cabin was wide open, and the look of the place wasn't right. Looked unlived in. There was no fire going, no clothes hung. I tied my horse in a small shelter where I suppose Abel's horse should have been tied but wasn't. Then went to take a gander in the cabin with one hand over my revolver. I called for Abel. Then I called for Flora as well, but got no reply from either. The cabin was a mess. Much of the furnishings that Abel had moved in or built were destroyed. The bed was broken in two. Its straw stuffing spilled across the floor. Curtains were ripped from the windows. There was a wardrobe in the cabin with open doors and broken shelves, formerly containing furs which now lay evicted in a disordered heap before it. The wardrobe had been finely crafted, polished. I wonder if he had had help moving it out there. I wonder if the men who helped him talked to people about where he was. It seemed likely that in selling off those furs for town goods, Abel had gotten more than he had bargained for, maybe given away his position. Langley, I'd kill him. I didn't care if I got away with it. I'd kill him for what he had done there. My head seethed as I stared out the window plotting revenge. It didn't really register in my eyes at first, but there was something out there, far off past the tree line in the shade. It was tall, the size of a bear. I feared for a moment that it was some grizzly gone mad from water fear and sickness. It wasn't no bear. The beast had broad shoulders, but what made it tall was its neck, which was thick like the neck of a horse. Its arms hung at its side. It was facing the cabin, facing the window I was gazing out from. I drew my pistol and moved to the door, but by the time I stepped out, whatever had been standing there was no longer in sight. I attributed it to my imagination, the figment of a recent distressed mind. My thoughts returned to the best course of action regarding the cabin. I had not seen Flora nor Abel in the cabin, nor did I witness their bodies during my approach. If there was any clue to their whereabouts, it would surely be in or around the cabin. If I found nothing, then I'd resort to asking nearby towns. I searched, but found nothing. In a few hours, I had examined every inch of the place. It seemed strange that if the pair was murdered here, that their bodies would be relocated elsewhere. After all, I was supposed to be the sole knower of their location. How could Langley have guessed that someone would come out here looking for them when he knew Abel's kin was dead? As I rummaged the inside of the place once more, I saw a shadow pass over the window, and I heard my horse belt out a panicked neigh. Before, at the prospect of danger, my impulse had been an aggressive one. Now, perhaps because I was less angry, or because the shadow had conveyed its size to me from a closer distance, I was more inclined to hide. The wardrobe was still open, and there was enough room for me to crouch inside among the broken shelves. I closed one door all the way, but was unable to reach the other one in time. The side that I did not reach was facing the wall, and I would not be visible to anything from the majority of the cabin unless I stuck my hand out to try to grab the other wardrobe door. I knew now that I had not been imagining what I had seen outside. I felt the thuds of its steps as it stalked around the cabin. I saw its shadow against the wall as it swung its head about, sniffing wetly around the room. As I listened, I could hear that it was muttering to itself.
Let's go back. Let's go back. Need more pay for the ferryman.
I recognized the voice. Flora? The name escaped my lips before I could inform my mouth of its danger.
Yes.
She dragged me out of the wardrobe. She was naked. Her skin seemed to be looser than before, and the deformity of the length in her neck was matched with the curious growth of her hands and lower legs. Her head was swollen and stared blankly like a puppet, only moving by the contortions of her neck below. Words hissed out of her face.
We go see the ferryman.
My actions following this felt separate from my control. I drew my pistol and fired at Flora as she tried to drag me. She didn't scream or even make an expression of fear that I could notice, but it did stop her from dragging me out of the cabin and caused her to step away. I fired again and she stumbled further, exiting the cabin and escaping my view. Taking this to mean that she was momentarily surprised, I took advantage. I ran out the cabin and to my horse. As I untied him, I saw the thing that was once Flora round the cabin and come towards me, its neck dipping with each step. I got my horse loose in the nick of time and we took off. I didn't look back. Didn't want to see it pursue. That's been that for a while on now. I never found Abel, but I have some frightening suspicions about what happened to him. I drink more than I used to. For every drink I take another one for him. If I could, I'd go find Langley. I'd make him pay for what he did to Abel's brother. Right now, though, I'm still moving. Whenever I return to a place, I hear that there's been a lady asking around for me.